It was just another school day. The sun was shining through the big windows of the cafeteria and the smell of pizza and fries filled the air. Students were laughing, chatting, and moving from table to table like they always did. But for one girl, this lunch break was about to become unforgettable. She wasn't looking for trouble. She never did. She was just sitting quietly at her usual spot minding her own business. Her tray had a sandwich, some fruit, and a carton of juice. Nothing fancy. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but somehow people always noticed her. Maybe it was because she walked with confidence. Or maybe it was because she didn't try to blend in. She wore her natural hair proudly, dressed modestly, and kept her head in her books more than in drama. She was the kind of student teachers liked, always on time, always respectful, always ready to learn. But not everyone appreciated that. In a school where popularity often mattered more than grades, she stood out in ways that made some people uncomfortable. And today, one of those people decided to act on it. From across the room, a group of students started making their way toward her. At the front was a girl known for being the center of attention. She was loud, bold, and used to getting what she wanted. People followed her not because she was kind, but because they were afraid of what she might say if they didn't. As she got closer, the noise around them seemed to quiet down. Eyes turned. Some students looked away quickly. Others leaned in, sensing something was about to go down. The popular girl stopped right in front of the quiet girl's table. A smirk spread across her face. She didn't sit down. She didn't ask permission. She just stood there, blocking the light, casting a shadow over the lunch tray. "You know," she said, loud enough for others to hear, "this isn't really your table." The quiet girl looked up slowly. She didn't seem surprised. Just calm. She took a bite of her sandwich and swallowed before responding. "I've been sitting here every day," she said simply. "No one ever said anything before?" That only made the other girl smirk more. "Well," she said, "I'm saying something now. Maybe you should find somewhere else to eat." Some of the students around them laughed, not because it was funny, but because they didn't know how else to react. Tension was rising and no one wanted to be caught in the middle. The quiet girl didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice or look away. She just met the other girl's stare with steady eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Because I'm sitting here alone? Because I don't talk much, or is it something else?" The smirk faltered for a second. The bully wasn't expecting a question. She was expecting fear. She was expecting silence, but she recovered fast. "I just think you'd be more comfortable somewhere else," she said, folding her arms. "You know, with your kind." The words landed hard, even if they weren't shouted. Around them, students stiffened. Some looked at each other. Others pulled out their phones, recording without saying a word. The quiet girl finally put down her sandwich. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. With slow, deliberate movements, she opened the camera app and pointed it at the girl standing over her. "I'm going to record this," she said, still calm. "Because I think what's happening right now needs to be seen." The bully's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected this. She thought she'd walk up, make a joke, scare the girl off, and walk away with a little more power. But now, the tables were turning. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "You always do. You always twist things." "I'm not twisting anything," the quiet girl replied. "I'm just showing the truth." More students were watching now. Some whispered nervously. Others began filming too, capturing the moment from different angles. The bully shifted on her feet. For the first time, she looked unsure. "This is stupid," she muttered, glancing at her friends for support. "I was just messing around." But the quiet girl didn't stop recording. "Then why did you tell me to leave?" she asked. "What's wrong with me being here?" There was no answer, only silence. The bully's face flushed red. She looked around, searching for an escape route. Her friends didn't speak up. No one came to defend her. And then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Her group followed, heads low, muttering among themselves. The quiet girl sat back in her seat. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just finished the last bite of her sandwich, packed up her stuff, and walked out like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Because that short encounter, the challenge, the courage, the calmness, was about to set off a chain reaction no one could have predicted. And when that video hit social media later that afternoon, things started moving faster than anyone could control. People saw what happened. They shared it, they talked about it, they asked questions. Who was the girl who stood up for herself? Why did someone feel entitled to tell her where she could sit? And most importantly, what happens next? That's when the story really begins. The quiet girl didn't think much about it after she left the cafeteria. She went back to class, finished her homework, and focused on her day like usual. But outside her little world, things were already spiraling out of control. By the time the final bell rang, the video she recorded had been shared dozens of times. Students who weren't even there during lunch break were watching it, talking about it, and adding their own opinions. Some praised her for standing up. Others criticized her for making a big deal out of nothing. But everyone agreed it was bold, it was brave, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. When she stepped off the bus later that afternoon, she noticed something strange. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Notifications flooded in. Messages from friends, comments on social media, posts, even requests from people she barely knew. At first, she ignored them, thinking it would die down. But when she finally opened her phone, she realized this wasn't just gossip anymore. It was a movement. Her heart raced as she scrolled through the footage. Someone had edited the clip, added captions, and posted it online with hashtags like Stand for Justice and No to Bullying. The views climbed into the thousands within hours. People across town and even in other states were weighing in, sharing their own stories of being treated unfairly or bullied because of who they were. One comment stood out. "This could have happened to any of us. Thank you for showing us how to handle it with grace." That hit her deeply. She hadn't planned to become some kind of symbol. All she wanted was to protect herself and make sure no one twisted the truth. Now, strangers were calling her courageous. Reporters were reaching out for interviews. Teachers were pulling her aside to ask if she was okay. Even her parents sat her down for a long talk about what to do next. At first, she felt overwhelmed. What did all these people want from her? Should she speak up more? Stay silent? Let the school handle it? She didn't have answers. But one thing was clear: the bully wasn't laughing anymore. Meanwhile, the girl who had started the trouble was panicking. Back at home, she locked herself in her room and stared at her phone screen. Comments poured in, but these weren't supportive ones. They were harsh, angry, and relentless. Words like hypocrite, bully, and coward filled her notifications. Friends she thought were loyal stopped replying to her texts. Parents called her in for serious conversations. Even her teammates on the sports squad gave her sideways glances. She tried to brush it off at first. "It's just drama," she muttered to herself. "People will forget about it by tomorrow." But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't just high school gossip. This was real life catching up with her. Her mom knocked on her door later that evening. When she opened it, her mom handed her the laptop. On the screen was an article someone wrote about the incident. The headline read, "Student calls out bullying in viral video." "This is bad," her mom said softly. "We need to figure out what to do." She shook her head, tears welling up. "I didn't mean for it to blow up like this," she whispered. "I thought I was just messing around." Her mom sighed. Sometimes messing around hurts people more than we realize. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the quiet girl's face, the calmness, the strength, the way she held her ground without raising her voice. She replayed the moment over and over in her mind, wishing she could take it back, but it was too late. The damage was done. The next morning at school, the atmosphere felt different. Whispers echoed in the hallways. Groups of students huddled together, talking quietly. Some looked at the quiet girl with admiration. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Even teachers seemed uneasy, unsure how to address the elephant in the room. During homeroom, the principal made an announcement over the intercom. "Attention, students," he began. "There has been a recent incident involving behavior that does not align with our values as a school community. We are investigating and taking steps to ensure fairness and accountability. In the meantime, let's remember to treat each other with kindness and respect." His words sounded official, but everyone knew exactly what, or rather who, he was talking about. Later that day, the quiet girl found herself surrounded by classmates asking questions. "Are you okay?" one asked. "What are you going to do now?" another chimed in. "Do you think she'll get expelled?" She didn't know how to answer. Truthfully, she hadn't thought that far ahead. She didn't care about revenge or punishment. She just wanted to finish her classes, graduate, and move on with her life. But now everyone expected her to lead, to say something inspiring, to start a revolution, to change the system. She felt torn between two worlds. On one side, there was the simple life she used to live, reading books, studying hard, staying invisible. On the other side, there was this new reality where people looked to her for guidance, for hope, for change. After school, she walked home alone, thinking about everything. As she passed by the park, she saw kids playing basketball, laughing and shouting encouragement to each other. For a moment, she wished she could go back to being invisible again. Life was so much simpler when no one paid attention. But then, she remembered why she recorded the video in the first place, not for fame or glory, but because she believed in fairness, because she refused to let anyone silence her, because sometimes standing up isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about paving the way for others. That realization gave her strength. She decided she wouldn't let fear dictate her choices. If people wanted her to speak, she would. If they needed her to lead, she'd try. But most importantly, she vowed to stay true to herself, to keep fighting for what's right no matter how hard it got. Back at the bully's house, things weren't improving. Her dad sat her down for a serious conversation. "You can't undo what happened," he said firmly, "but you can choose how to respond. Are you going to ignore it and pretend it doesn't matter, or are you going to take responsibility and learn from this?" She hesitated. Taking responsibility meant admitting she was wrong. It meant facing the consequences head-on instead of hiding behind excuses. Could she do that? Her dad placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not a bad person," he said gently, "but your actions have hurt someone. Owning up to that takes courage." For the first time, she understood. Courage wasn't about being perfect. It was about acknowledging mistakes and trying to make things right. That night, she wrote a letter. It wasn't easy. Every word felt heavy, every sentence weighed with guilt. But by the end, she felt lighter. Maybe this was her chance to start over. Not just for herself, but for everyone watching. The next day at school felt like stepping into a storm. The quiet girl walked through the hallways, her head held high, but she could feel the weight of everyone's stares. Some students smiled at her as she passed by, while others whispered, behind cupped hands. A few even clapped softly when she entered her first period class. She wasn't sure how to react. Should she smile back? Should she ignore it? All she wanted was for things to go back to normal, but deep down she knew normal was long gone. By lunchtime, the cafeteria buzzed louder than ever. Normally, this was the place where people laughed, gossiped, or complained about homework. But today it felt tense, electric. Conversations stopped mid-sentence whenever someone new entered the room. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something or someone. She hesitated before walking in. Her usual table sat empty, untouched since yesterday. For a moment, she considered sitting somewhere else, blending into the background again. But then, she remembered why she recorded the video in the first place. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked straight to her spot. As soon as she sat down, the whispers started again. At another corner of the cafeteria, the bully sat surrounded by what remained of her group. They weren't laughing or joking around like they usually did. Instead, they looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact. She glanced over at the quiet girl's table, guilt flashing across her face. Then she quickly looked away. But today, something unexpected happened. Another student, a boy who rarely spoke up, walked over to the quiet girl's table and placed a folded piece of paper near her tray. Before she could ask what it was, he gave her a small nod and walked away without saying a word. Curious, she unfolded the note. Written in neat handwriting were 3 simple words: "We stand with you." Her heart swelled. She looked around the room, searching for the boy who left the note, but he was already gone. That's when she noticed other students doing the same thing, slipping notes onto her table, leaving encouraging messages, or simply giving her thumbs up from across the room. Each gesture was small, but together, they added up to something powerful. It was like an invisible wave of support spreading through the cafeteria. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to smile. Meanwhile, the bully couldn't shake off the heaviness pressing down on her chest. Sitting among her so-called friends felt lonelier than being alone. None of them were defending her anymore. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how. Even her closest allies seemed unsure whether sticking by her side was worth the trouble. One of her teammates leaned in and whispered, "You should probably talk to her." She froze. "What? No way. She hates me." "She doesn't hate you," the teammate replied. "She's just standing up for herself. You need to do the same if you want people to forgive you." Forgiveness. The word hit her hard. Was that even possible now? After everything that had happened, after all the mean comments and cruel jokes she'd made, not just to the quiet girl, but to plenty of others too. Could anyone really forgive her? That night, she decided to take a step forward. She pulled out the letter she'd written earlier and read it one more time. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Taking a deep breath, she slipped it into her backpack and promised herself she'd find the courage to deliver it. The following morning, the school administration called both girls into the principal's office. Neither of them knew what to expect. The quiet girl arrived first, clutching her books tightly. The bully came in moments later, looking pale and nervous. They avoided looking at each other as they sat down. The principal cleared his throat. "I've spoken to both of your parents and we've reviewed the evidence," he began. "This situation has brought attention not only to our school, but also to issues we can no longer ignore. Bullying, discrimination, and exclusion have no place here." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We're going to address these problems head-on. Starting today, we'll hold workshops on diversity, inclusion, and conflict resolution. We're also introducing anonymous reporting tools so students feel safe speaking up. These changes won't happen overnight, but they will happen." Then, he turned to the bully. "As for you, there will be consequences. Suspension is non-negotiable. Additionally, you'll attend mandatory counseling sessions on empathy and understanding bias. Your participation in extracurricular activities is suspended until further notice." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded silently. She deserved every bit of it. Finally, he addressed the quiet girl. "Thank you for coming forward. Your actions have sparked important conversations. If you'd like to share your thoughts or concerns moving forward, please don't hesitate to reach out." She nodded, feeling a mix of emotions: relief, pride, and maybe even a little sadness for the girl sitting across from her. After the meeting ended, the bully hesitated outside the door. She watched as the quiet girl headed toward her locker. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, she stepped forward. "Hey," she said softly. The quiet girl turned around, surprised. "Yes, sir. I wrote this for you." She held out the crumpled letter, her hands trembling. "It's not much, but I meant every word." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the quiet girl reached out and took the letter. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she looked directly into the bully's eyes and said, "Thank you for trying." Those 5 words carried more weight than either of them realized. The bully blinked back tears and nodded before walking away. Later, that evening, the quiet girl sat on her bed and carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting was messy, almost frantic, but the message was clear. "I'm sorry for what I said. I was wrong, and I regret it. I hope someday you can forgive me. Thank you for showing me that standing up for yourself takes real strength." I want to be better, not just for you, but for everyone I've hurt. Reading those words stirred something inside her. Forgiveness wasn't easy, especially after everything she'd been through, but she realized something important. Change starts with second chances, and maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something bigger. Across town, the bully sat in her room staring at the ceiling. She didn't know if the quiet girl would ever truly forgive her. What she did know was that she couldn't go back to the person she used to be. This experience had stripped her of her confidence, her friendships, and her sense of self, but it had also given her a chance to rebuild, to grow, to become someone worthy of respect. Little did either of them know, their actions were inspiring others to speak up, to listen, and to believe in the power of change. The school wasn't perfect yet, but it was starting to heal. And sometimes, that's all it takes. One brave moment, one heartfelt apology, one step toward a brighter future. The days turned into weeks, and the school slowly began to transform. The quiet girl noticed it first in small ways, things that seemed insignificant on their own, but added up to something bigger. Teachers started addressing topics like respect and empathy during class discussions. Students who used to ignore her now greeted her with smiles or even joined her at lunch. Some even thanked her for inspiring them to speak up when they saw unfairness happening around them. One afternoon, as she sat working on an assignment in the library, a group of students approached her table. She looked up, surprised. They weren't people she'd ever talked to before, just kids from different grades, backgrounds, and cliques. One of them spoke up nervously. "We were wondering if you'd help us start something," he said. "Something? To make sure no one feels alone here anymore." She tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Another student chimed in. "We want to create a space where anyone can share what they're going through, whether it's bullying, feeling left out, or just needing someone to listen. We thought maybe you could lead it since, well, you've already shown us how important it is to stand up." Her cheeks flushed. Leading wasn't something she'd ever imagined herself doing, but the sincerity in their voices made her pause. These weren't perfect people. They were regular students who had witnessed what happened and wanted to do better. Maybe this was her chance to turn pain into purpose. "I'll think about it," she said finally, giving them a small smile. But deep down, she knew she couldn't say no. Meanwhile, the bully's life continued to unravel and rebuild in unexpected ways. Her suspension ended after 2 weeks, but returning to school felt like walking into hostile territory. People avoided her, whispered behind her back, or gave her cold stares. Even teachers treated her differently, watching her every move like she might explode at any moment. At first, she tried to act like nothing had changed. She put on her usual confident mask, pretending not to care. But inside, she felt hollow. The friends she once relied on barely acknowledged her existence. Her spot on the sports team, the thing she'd always been proud of, was gone. And worst of all, she couldn't escape the guilt gnawing at her conscience. During one particularly tough day, she found herself sitting alone under a tree outside the school building. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through social media, aimlessly. That's when she stumbled upon a post from someone she didn't know personally. It read, "Sometimes we mess up. Sometimes we hurt others without meaning to. But real strength comes from owning our mistakes and learning from them. Change starts with us." The words hit her hard. Tears pricked her eyes, and she quickly closed the app, embarrassed by her own reaction. But those words stayed with her long after she tucked her phone away. Later that week, she attended her first counseling session. At first, she resented being there, convinced it wouldn't help. But the counselor, a kind woman with a calming voice, didn't push her. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions that forced her to reflect on why she acted the way she did. "Why? Do you think you lashed out at her?" the counselor asked gently. She hesitated, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "I don't know. I guess I felt threatened." Threatened? By what? By her confidence, she admitted quietly. She didn't need anyone's approval, and I hated that. I wanted to bring her down because it made me feel better about myself. The counselor nodded. That's a common feeling. But hurting someone else doesn't fix the emptiness inside. It only makes it worse. For the first time, she understood. All her cruelty hadn't come from a place of strength. It had come from insecurity. Admitting that was painful, but it also felt freeing. Like shedding a heavy coat she'd been wearing for years without realizing how much it weighed her down. Back at school, the quiet girl decided to take the leap. With the help of the students who approached her, she launched a new initiative called Voices Matter. It started as a small club meeting once a week, but word spread fast. Soon, dozens of students showed up to share their stories, offer support, or simply listen. One meeting stood out in particular. A freshman boy stood up hesitantly, his hands shaking as he held a piece of paper. He explained how he'd been teased relentlessly for his accent since starting high school. For months, he kept quiet, afraid of drawing more attention to himself. But hearing about the quiet girl's courage inspired him to speak up. I didn't think anyone would care, he admitted, his voice cracking. But coming here today, it makes me feel like maybe I'm not alone. The room erupted in applause, not loud or overwhelming, but warm and encouraging. The quiet girl watched. From the side, her heart swelling with pride. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about creating a community where everyone mattered. Even some teachers began attending the meetings, sharing their own experiences with discrimination or bias. One teacher talked about growing up poor and being judged for the clothes she wore. Another admitted to struggling with mental health issues while trying to keep up appearances. Their vulnerability broke down walls, showing students that adults weren't immune to pain either. As the weeks went by, the changes rippled through the school. Students started holding each other accountable in subtle ways. When someone cracked, a hurtful joke. Another would call them out politely but firmly. Cliques that once excluded others began opening up, inviting new faces into their circles. Conversations shifted from gossip to meaningful discussions about fairness, inclusion, and kindness. Even the administration took notice. The principal announced plans to host diversity workshops led by local activists. Anonymous suggestion boxes appeared in classrooms, allowing students to report concerns without fear of backlash. Slowly but surely, the toxic culture that had simmered beneath the surface for years began to fade. Then came the turning point, the assembly. It was organized by the Voices Matter group, with the quiet girl reluctantly agreeing to give a short speech. On the morning of the event, nerves buzzed through the auditorium. Students filed in, curious and skeptical. Would this just be another boring lecture? Or would it actually mean something? When the quiet girl stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She gripped the microphone tightly, her palms sweaty, but her voice remained steady. When I recorded that video, she began, I wasn't trying to start a movement. I just wanted to protect myself. But what happened next taught me something important. None of us are truly invisible. Our actions matter, even the smallest ones. Whether we choose to lift someone up or tear them down, we leave a mark. She paused, scanning the sea of faces before continuing. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's about learning from our mistakes and choosing to be better. Because when we stand together, we can change things. Not just here, but everywhere. The crowd erupted into applause, louder than she expected. Some students wiped away tears. Others cheered, pumping their fists in the air. Even the teachers clapped enthusiastically, nodding along with her words. When she stepped off the stage, she felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally lifted. In the back row, the bully sat quietly, listening intently. She hadn't planned to attend the assembly, but curiosity got the better of her. As the quiet girl spoke, she found herself nodding along too. For the first time, she felt hopeful, not for herself, but for the possibility of redemption. Afterward, she approached the quiet girl cautiously. That was amazing, she said softly. You really are changing things. The quiet girl looked at her, surprised. Then she smiled faintly. We're all part of this, even you. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start, and sometimes that's enough. The school felt different now, like it had woken up from a long sleep. The quiet girl noticed it everywhere she went. Conversations in the hallways weren't just about weekend plans or gossip anymore. They were about respect, fairness, and standing up for one another. Even the cafeteria, once a battleground of cliques and whispers, started to feel like a place where everyone belonged. One day, as she walked through the doors during lunch, she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. A group of students had set up a table near the entrance with a big sign that read, "Kindness starts here." They handed out stickers, flyers, and little notes with encouraging messages. Some kids even wore t-shirts printed with slogans like, "Be brave," and "Lift each other up." She smiled to herself, feeling a wave of pride. This wasn't her doing alone. It was the result of everyone coming together. But still, it reminded her of how far they'd come since that tense moment in the cafeteria weeks ago. As she approached her usual table, someone stopped her. It was one of the teachers, an older woman who always seemed too busy to notice anyone outside her classroom. Today, though, she looked directly at the quiet girl and said, "Thank you." "For what?" the quiet girl asked, genuinely confused. "Or reminding us all why we're here," the teacher replied simply. "This isn't just a building, it's a community, and you've helped bring it back to life." Her words lingered in the quiet girl's mind long after the teacher walked away. She realized something important. That change wasn't just about fixing problems. It was about creating connections, fostering understanding, and building something stronger than before. Meanwhile, the bully was finding her own way forward, but it wasn't easy. Every day felt like walking a tightrope between guilt and hope. She tried to stay invisible, avoiding eye contact and keeping her head down. But invisibility wasn't an option anymore. People noticed her, not because they wanted to shame her, but because they expected her to do better. One afternoon during a Voices Matter meeting, the quiet girl invited her to join. At first, the bully hesitated, shaking her head quickly. "I don't belong there," she muttered. "Not after everything." "I did." But the quiet girl didn't give up. "You're not defined by your worst moments," she said gently. "If you want to change, this is where it starts." Those words stuck with her. That night, lying awake in bed, she replayed them over and over. Maybe she could change. Maybe she owed it to herself and to everyone else to try. The next week, she showed up at the meeting. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the door, half expecting people to glare at her or whisper behind her back. Instead, they greeted her warmly, making space for her at the circle of chairs. When it was her turn to speak, she froze. All eyes turned to her, waiting patiently. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry. For everything. I know, saying it doesn't fix anything, but I want to make things right." No one interrupted. No one judged. Instead, they nodded, offering small smiles of encouragement. One student even said, "We've all messed up. What matters is what we do next." For the first time in months, she felt like she might actually have a chance to start over. Over the next few weeks, the bully threw herself into the work of rebuilding. She volunteered to help organize events for the Voices Matter group, stayed late after meetings to clean up, and even offered to mentor younger students who struggled with similar issues. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave her purpose, a reason to wake up every morning and face the world again. Slowly, people began to see her differently, not as the mean girl who thought she was untouchable, but as someone willing to learn and grow. Some still held grudges, of course, but most appreciated her effort, and that meant more to her than she ever expected. One day, during a workshop on empathy, she shared her story publicly for the first time. Standing in front of a packed auditorium filled with students, teachers, and even parents, she admitted everything: the jealousy, the insecurity, the cruelty. Her voice cracked at times, and tears streamed down her cheeks, but she kept going. "I thought being popular made me strong," she said. "But I was wrong. Real strength comes from admitting when you're wrong and working to be better." When she finished, the room erupted into applause. People stood up, cheering and clapping. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not as someone to fear or envy, but as a person capable of growth. Back in the classrooms, the changes continued to take root. Teachers incorporated lessons on diversity and inclusion into their curriculums. History classes explored stories of marginalized communities. English assignments focused on themes of justice and equality. Even math problems sometimes tied back to real-world scenarios about fairness and resource distribution. Students responded eagerly. They started asking questions, challenging assumptions, and looking at the world through new lenses. Conversations spilled out of the classrooms and into the hallways, onto the bus rides home and into family dinners. Parents noticed the shift too. Many reached out to the school, thanking administrators for fostering such a positive environment. Others joined the movement, volunteering to lead workshops or share their own experiences with discrimination and resilience. Even the local news picked up on the story. Reporters interviewed students and teachers, highlighting the school's transformation as an example of how communities can heal and grow together. The quiet girl found herself featured in several articles, though she insisted the focus should be on the collective effort rather than her individual actions. "It's not about me," she told one reporter firmly. "It's about what we've built together." By spring, the school felt almost unrecognizable. The tension that used to hang in the air had lifted, replaced by a sense of unity and purpose. Cliques blurred into friendships. Students supported each other in ways they never had before. Even the cafeteria buzzed with laughter and conversation. Not because drama had disappeared, but because people chose kindness over conflict. During one particularly sunny afternoon, the quiet girl sat outside with a group of friends, enjoying the fresh air. As they laughed and joked, she glanced around at the familiar faces surrounding her. These weren't just classmates anymore. They were allies, teammates, and confidants. Someone nudged her playfully. "You know, none of this would have happened without you." She shook her head, smiling. "Not true. It happened because everyone decided to care." And maybe that was the biggest lesson of all, that real change doesn't come from one person standing alone. It comes from everyone standing together. The end of the school year crept closer, bringing with it a mix of excitement and nostalgia. For most students, it was just another milestone, another step towards summer break or the next chapter of their lives. But for the quiet girl, this year felt different. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving, about leaving behind something meaningful. On the last day of school, the Voices Matter group hosted a special event, a celebration of everything they'd accomplished. Together, the auditorium buzzed with energy as students filed in, carrying snacks, balloons, and handmade posters. Someone had strung up a banner across the stage that read, "Together we rise." The quiet girl stood near the back, watching everyone interact. She didn't plan to speak much today. It was supposed to be a time for others to share their stories and reflect on how far they'd come. Still, she couldn't help but feel a swell of pride as she looked around at the faces in the crowd. These were the same kids who used to ignore each other, judge each other, or even hurt each other. Now they sat side by side, laughing and cheering like old friends. When the program began, students took turns stepping onto the stage. Some shared heartfelt speeches about overcoming challenges. Others performed songs or poems inspired by their journey. A few even acted out skits showing how small acts of kindness could make a big difference. Then came the moment no one expected, not even her. One of the students called the quiet girl to the stage. At first she hesitated, shaking her head and mouthing, "No, I'm good." But the applause grew louder, more insistent until she finally relented and walked up. She gripped the microphone tightly, glancing out at the sea of faces before her. Her voice trembled slightly as she began to speak. "When this all started," she said, "I never imagined it would lead us here. I thought standing up meant protecting myself and maybe inspiring one or two people along the way. But what happened instead, well, it changed everything." She paused, letting her words sink in. Change doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen because one person decides to fight back. It happens because we choose to listen, to learn, and to grow together. Every single one of you played a part in this. You showed me and everyone else that hope is stronger than fear, that unity is stronger than division. The room erupted into applause again, but she held up a hand to quiet them down. This isn't the end, she continued. It's just the beginning. Wherever life takes us next, let's remember what we've built here. Let's keep lifting each other up, speaking out when things aren't right, and believing that every voice matters, including our own. By the time she stepped off the stage, tears streamed down her face, but so did smiles. Students surrounded her, hugging her, thanking her, telling her how much she'd inspired them. For once, she didn't try to brush off the attention. She accepted it, knowing it wasn't really about her. It was about what they'd created, together. As the celebration wound down, the bully found herself lingering near the exit. She hadn't planned to stay long, unsure if anyone still wanted her there. But as she watched the quiet girl being celebrated, something inside her shifted. Maybe redemption wasn't about earning forgiveness. It was about proving you deserved. She approached the quiet girl hesitantly, clutching a folded piece of paper in her hands. "Can I talk to you?" she asked softly. The quiet girl nodded, motioning for her to follow. They stepped outside into the warm evening air, the sounds of laughter and music fading behind them. "I wrote this for you," the bully said, handing over the note. "It's kind of a thank you letter, I guess." The quiet girl unfolded it carefully. Inside, written in shaky handwriting, were these words. "Thank you for showing me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing even when you're scared. Thank you for giving me a second chance even though I didn't deserve it. And thank you for reminding me that it's never too late to change." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at the bully. "You don't need my forgiveness," she said gently. "You already forgave yourself. That's what matters." For the first time in months, the bully smiled, a real, genuine smile. Not the kind she used to fake to fit in, but the kind that came from feeling truly seen and accepted. A few weeks later, graduation day arrived. The quiet girl stood among her classmates, wearing her cap and gown, listening to the principal's speech about chasing dreams and making a difference. When they announced her name, she walked across the stage to thunderous applause. She glanced out at the audience, spotting her parents clapping proudly, her friends cheering wildly, and even some teachers wiping away tears. But what struck her most was seeing the bully sitting quietly in the back row, smiling softly. She hadn't graduated with them. Her suspension had cost her a semester, but she'd shown up anyway, determined to support the person who'd unknowingly changed her life. Afterward, during the reception, the two crossed paths again. This time, the conversation flowed easily without hesitation or awkwardness. They talked about the future, the quiet girl heading off to college, the bully planning to volunteer at a youth center over the summer. Both admitted they weren't sure what lay ahead, but both sounded hopeful. "You'll do great things," the quiet girl said confidently. "I know it." The bully laughed nervously. "Maybe, but either way I'll owe it all to you." "No," the quiet girl corrected her. "You'll owe it to yourself, for choosing to be better." Months passed and life moved forward. The quiet girl settled into college, thriving in an environment where diversity was celebrated and voices were amplified. She stayed connected to her high school friends, checking in regularly to see how the Voices Matter group was growing under new leadership. Occasionally, she received messages from former classmates sharing updates about their own journeys, how they'd carried the lessons they learned into their careers, relationships, and communities. Back home, the bully threw herself into her volunteer work. At first, she doubted whether she could make a difference, but as she mentored younger kids, teaching them about empathy and resilience, she realized something important. Healing wasn't just about fixing your past. It was about building a better future. One evening, while scrolling through social media, she stumbled upon a post from the quiet girl. It was a photo of her standing in front of a podium, delivering a speech at a university event. The caption read, "Change starts with courage. Keep going." Tears welled up in her eyes as she stared at the picture. Courage. That word had followed her everywhere since that fateful day in the cafeteria. It wasn't about being perfect or fearless, it was about taking the next step, even when you weren't sure where it would lead. And now, looking back, she realized she'd taken more steps than she ever thought possible. Years later, when someone asked the quiet girl how she managed to spark such a profound transformation, she always gave the same answer. It wasn't me. It was all of us. Together, we reminded each other that every voice matters, and that's how you change the world. Because sometimes the smallest moments, the bravest choices, the quietest stands, create ripples that reach farther than anyone could imagine.